Greetings, fellow programmers. This is Pavel, and this is a C# exercise that was sent to me via email. We are going to create a class for Invoice. I did a few Invoice classes in other exercises, but this one's a little different because basically what I want is to create multiple constructors for this class and demonstrate how the overloading constructors work. So here's the problem. Create an invoice class that could be used by bookstore. Items to include as data members are item number, description, unit price, and quantity purchased. Include appropriate constructors and properties plus an additional method that calculates the cost using the quantity and unit price. Now you will code additional items inside the calling program as static values and display them as well to show the different type of constructors. So you can see, like for example, here you have a input. I don't know if you can see it. You have an input like this with the number and price and purchase, but you have you only display something like this, like you will only display the name of the item and the total cost. You would not actually display the other properties, even though you actually are collecting the input for them. Over here you display two other properties. You display the number and total cost, and over here you display all of them. So in other words, you need different constructors with different arguments or different number of arguments in them, and when you create in these classes or objects, you will use different number of arguments to invoke different constructors. We will also have a toString method that returns the item description and total cost. That will be the override. So we will only display the description and total cost in the toString method. All right, so here's my project. I'm going to create a class called Invoice, and this is gonna be a fairly simple class with only 4 properties. It's going to have the number, so I'm just gonna create properties, public string number, which is basically the ID, but I want to call it number. And I'm making it as a string because even though it could be just a number, like an ID, it's still easy and easier to have it as a string because you don't use it for any calculations. It's just a identification of each item, so you can have it as a string instead of a number. And it's easier to collect input because input is by default string. So we will do the string description, get and set. So these are all automatic properties. Public is gonna be a double, and it's gonna be the unit price. Get and set. And finally we'll have public integer quantity, and it's gonna be get and set. And let's create the method that calculates the total. That's gonna be easy one. It will return a double. It will return the total. So, and I'll just call it calculate total. No arguments there, and we will simply return the unit price multiplied by the quantity. So when you obviously that will give you the total, and then we will return the result of it as our from the method. And we can do another one. We can do our toString. So public override toString method, and over here we will return a formatted string. So we will do string dot format, and what do they want us to? They want the description. Let me just see. description and total cost will be in our toString method. So we will simply format. I'll start on a new line, so I'll start with n, like a new line, and the first argument it's gonna be the item description, and then we will output the description, the string, and on a new line after that we will output total cost, and that will be, actually this one's gonna be 0, of course, because we start from 0, and this one's gonna be the placeholder number 1, and it's gonna be a currency, and I'll do currency with 2 decimal places. Okay, so that's gonna be our toString method, and for the placeholders, so we will have the description, and we will have the total cost, which is returned from the calculate total method. So we will simply pass the whole method there, which will return the total cost, and pass it into our placeholder here. So that's our toString method, and I think that's really all. So now we can do the bunch of the constructors. So I'm gonna have first one, it's gonna be constructor with all parameters, and so it will be invoice, and we will pass the string ID, we will pass the string description, we will pass the double unit price, and we will pass the quantity. So all the properties will be populated from this constructor. It will have all the parameters in it. So we will assign number equals ID, our description equals the description that we pass into it, our unit price will equal to the unit price, and our quantity property will equal to the quantity argument passed into this constructor. So this is the full constructor, you may say. Now I'm gonna create also another one. This one's gonna be constructor with description, unit price, and quantity. However, I'm going to do something here. I'm gonna create the quantity as a default, which basically means that you may or may not pass the quantity. If you do, it will assign the value that you pass to our property, and if you don't, we will have a default value that will be assigned to it instead. So we will do a public invoice, and again we will pass the string ID, double, it's gonna be the unit price, and default, it's gonna be the integer quantity. However, like I said, this is gonna be a default. It will have a default value, so we will do quantity equals, and let's just say 5. So if we pass quantity, it will override it. If we don't, then by default we will assign 5 to it. So we will once again do description equals description unit price. No. Oh, I passed the ID instead of description, sorry. So it's supposed to be description like that, not ID. I don't need ID. Unit price equals unit price, and quantity equals quantity. So again, if we pass a value to it, that value will be assigned to our property. If we don't and call this constructor, then quantity will by default equal 5. So that's the default argument in our constructor. So technically, this constructor can serve as 2 different constructors. It can have 3 arguments, or it can just have two arguments. It can have string, it has to have description and unit price, and if you pass the quantity, it will still invoke this constructor. If we don't, if you'll just pass description and unit price, it will still invoke this one because the quantity has a default value. So, and this constructor has 4 different arguments, so it is a different so-called signature. So let's just do these 2 for now, and let's create our program and our main method, and let's just create those. You know what? Let's get the input from console, at least some of it. Console dot write, and we can do enter item description, and we will pass that item or whatever the input into a variable called item. It's gonna be console dot read line, and I'm gonna copy paste it, and I'm gonna do 3 more. So it's gonna be console.write, please enter item number, which is the ID. So we will do ID equals console.readline. Then we will do enter, I don't know, quantity, and then we will do quantity. However, since quantity needs to be an integer, we need to convert the input to an integer. So we will do convert dot to integer, and I will paste the console.readline into the convert method. So it will read the line, and then it will convert it to integer and pass it to a quantity. And similarly, we will do enter unit price, and this one is gonna be price, and it's gonna be converted to double, just like but it's the same principle. So it's gonna be converted to double, and whatever we enter we will convert to double and assign it to a variable called price. So this is our input. So now what we can do, or we should do, let me just move this so I have more real estate here so you can see it better. We can create our objects. Now remember, we are having our toString method, which basically outputs the object by default. It will output the item description and total cost. So let's create an object with, let's say we can enter our first invoice. So we will do console, so that write line, and we will output first invoice, and console dot write line we will output right away. We can create the object straight into our write line, since we are outputting everything, we are displaying everything, we are not processing it in any way. We can just pass it right here as new invoice. This is creating the new invoice, and let's say we're gonna pass the item in it, price, and we will pass the quantity. So we are passing 3 arguments. So by default, this when it has 3 arguments, it will come to our invoice class, look at the first invoice constructor. It has 4 arguments, so that's not the one. So it comes over here. Yeah, this one has 3 arguments, so it will invoke this one. So that's our first invoice. We can do console dot write line, and output second invoice, and on a new line we will do console dot write line, and we will do the same thing with new invoice, but this time we will only put item and price into it. So remember the constructor with optional, we will have item, which is the description, and price. We don't have quantity, but we don't need it. It will still come to this one and invoke this one and assign quantity of 5 by default. So you will see how that works when I run the program. But first, let me do the thread invoice, and I'm gonna do console.write line. This is gonna be third invoice, and in it we will output everything. We will call the constructor for all 4 arguments. So we will do console.write line, and we will do our new invoice, and we will pass the ID, item, price, and quantity. So this is gonna be the complete constructor. Okay, so let me build it and run it and see if well, first let's see it succeeded. So let's run it, and here it asks for the description. So I will do desktop table. The item number, like ID, let's say is 1. The quantity, I don't know why it says I quantity, because I copy pasted and I didn't delete I guess. But it's asking for quantity, so I'm gonna do 10. And unit price, I'm gonna do $79.95. And when I press enter, I get first invoice. Item description is desktop table, and 10 multiplied by $79.95. Yeah, that's correct. $799.50. But second invoice is desktop table, but the total cost is $399.75. That's because, remember, in the second invoice we didn't pass the quantity into our constructor. Instead, even though we entered it as an input, it wasn't never passed into a constructor. Instead, it was initialized with the default value of 5. So we simply multiplied 5 times $79.95, which would be $399.75. Well, let me just double check that. So $79.95 multiplied by 5, $399.75. So that's correct. So you may have an unexpected output this way, because you enter 10 as your quantity, but suddenly you get only half the price, and that's because the optional argument was invoked because you didn't pass the quantity into this constructor. In a third invoice, we input all the we input the item, quantity, we passed it into constructor, but we still only output the description and cost. We did not output the item number or what the quantity was or anything like that, even though we passed it into the constructor. And that's because the invoice class, the toString method, only outputs the description and total cost. Doesn't matter if you pass all 4 arguments or 2 arguments, the output will be in this case always formatted as description and total cost only, because we are directly outputting our console.write line. We are invoking or creating the object of invoice and outputting the toString method of it automatically right here, because we passed it into the console.write line. And since that has only 2 lines for description and calculate total, that's what its output, no matter how many arguments are being passed. Now, we can do something when it comes to the toString. Okay, let's try something like this. Let me just close this window. When I come over here before return, I will do something like this. If I will declare variable ID equals, and I will let me just write it and I will explain what it means. So if number equals null, not empty, just null, then we will output empty string. Otherwise, we will output item number plus, and over here we will output our property number and then a new line. So this will the way this would read is if the number or the ID is not null, in other words, if it was entered and passed into our constructor, if it's active or it was activated and assigned to our number property, then output item number is and the actual number. So I can come over here into our toString method, and the first placeholder will be 0, which will now this one will be 1 and this one will be 2. And what this will do is basically we will put the ID as the first placeholder. So if the ID was declared and if it's not null, then it will be output. If it is null, if it was not declared and passed into the constructor, then it's gonna be empty. So it simply will ignore it. There will be nothing here. But if it is, it will output the item number and number. So let me just build it and demonstrate. Then I'm gonna run it, and it's gonna be desktop table and table number 1, quantity 10, and unit price 79.95. So now I have the first two are the same. There's nothing changed. The item number, the ID was not passed to the constructor there, so it's not being output. But the third one, since it's we passed the actual ID into the constructor, now the toString methods output it because it's not null, so it's assigned the value of 1 to it and output into our toString method. And we could do something similar for if you wanted to, like this output has also the quantity purchased. It has the unit price. Like all the properties are being displayed. Now that wouldn't necessarily work here, at least not in this order, because you have the total cost last. So the way, we would have the description number. If you wanted to keep the order, it wouldn't simply work this way. But we could create another toString method. We could with all the arguments in it. So we could do public string complete output, which is not to override toString. This one is a different thing. So let me just we will return formatted string again, and it will be the item description. Description. It's gonna be 0. And it's gonna be n. On the new one, I'm gonna print it on. I'm gonna type it on new line, each of them, so we can see it better. Item number, it's gonna be 1 and n. Then the next one will be quantity purchased. It's gonna be number 2 and a new line. Then it's gonna be the unit price, and this is gonna be a currency, so it's gonna be 3, but it's gonna be currency with 2 decimal places, and new line. And finally we'll do total cost, and this is gonna be the number 4, and again it's a currency with 2 decimal places, and we can do a new line again. So now we can simply place the first thing is description. Description is first, the second is the ID, which is the number. Quantity is the next one, then it's the unit price, and finally it's the total cost, which is the calculate total method. So this is like our second toString method, but now we can come to our program and we can create let's say last invoice, and you will see the right line. It's gonna be last invoice, and over here you see the thing is, like if I do the same thing here like I did with when I create the object within the console.write line, this wouldn't work. It would output exactly the same thing as the thread invoice, because now I cannot just output. I'm not going to output the toString method. I'm trying to output the complete output method. So in order to do that, I have to have the actual object with actual name declared first. So instead of console.write line, I have to actually create the object. If I want to call that method, I need an invoice equals new invoice, and I pass all the arguments. And now I will do console.write line, and in it I will call that method from our invoice object dot complete output. So you see the objects are the same, or should be the same, in that they call the same constructor with ID, item, price, and quantity, both of these. But this one, thread invoice, will simply output the toString method, but the last invoice will output this method with this formatting. So let me run it. And it's gonna be the same thing. I will do desktop table, item number 1, quantity I do 10, and price 79.50, whatever. So now I have the first that we passed. It only has the total cost and description. The third has total cost and description. I mean the second. The third has description and cost, but it also has the number, the ID, because remember we created this condition that if it is basically called from this constructor that accepts the ID, and if it's not null, then we will print it. It's the argument 0 over here. And if it is not, if it's from this constructor, then we will simply output as empty. So basically it's gonna be nothing in front of the item description over here, and it will simply output nothing. Now the third one, we placed all the arguments in it, in the constructor, so but it's still called the toString method. And the last one, however, we passed all 4 arguments in it, and we call the complete output method, which formatted basically all the arguments out, all the properties, the number, the purchase, the quantity, the price, and the total cost. So this is the difference between the toString method and a method that you specify. toString method, it's easy to call straight from the console.write line. If you don't need the object, if you don't need to do any other manipulation, just output it, you can do it this way. However, if you do need to manipulate that object, you need to actually invoke it, create the object, and then you have access to all the methods and properties as well. So I hope you kind of see how the overloading constructors work and how the optional arguments in constructor may work. This is this is important thing, because in most cases, or in many cases, you will have multiple constructors for each class with different number of arguments, and that's how you call them. You basically create the object with the appropriate number of arguments that the constructor accepts, and it will be called automatically. You don't specify what constructor you want to call. It simply will match the signature, the number of arguments, and not just the number of arguments, but also the type of argument. Like if this one was a integer, let's say, if I change this to integer, it wouldn't work. You can already see that it underlined it because item is string, so there is no constructor with that would accept integer as the first argument. So the type and the number of arguments is important. That's how each constructor knows which or basically which object is how the object is gonna be created with what constructor. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Did you learn something? If you did, please leave a like, share with your friends, comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.